Good evening. Welcome to another episode of America in Black and White, where we navigate the complexities of race relations in the United States. Today, we have a special guest joining us, Mr. Robert Suttle. Let's dive into this journey of giving you guys some background on Mr. Suttle. Robert is the founder and principal consultant at Robert Suttle Consulting, where he partners with leaders and advocacy groups to advance initiatives that promote awareness and foster a more informed, compassionate society. Integrating lived experience into his approach, he develops resonant strategies driving social change through engagement, advocacy, and support. A Louisiana native and long-term survivor living with HIV, Robert addresses critical issues like HIV criminalization, stigma, and discrimination, focusing particularly on their intersection with equity and social justice. He is a leading voice on the disproportionate impact of HIV criminalization on the Black and LGBTQ communities, particularly in the Deep South. His advocacy has significantly raised the profile of HIV decriminalization both nationally and internationally, shaping discourse and policy. Nationally, Robert chairs the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation Council of Justice Leaders and is an expert member of the HIV Justice Network's Global Advocacy Panel. He also contributes to We Create Space, a social queer-led platform that unites speakers from around the world. Robert's authentic advocacy has earned him widespread recognition. He is a former steering committee member of the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, a recipient of the AIDS Watch Positive Leadership Award, a POS 100 honoree celebrating Black advocates, and the inaugural recipient of the Zero Project's Amplify Award, notably for his tenure as a co-founder of the Zero Project. Robert has also marked his influence through media, being a featured guest on award-winning podcasts and contributing as a writer to publications like the New York Times, The Body, Positively Aware, Huffington Post, POS, and Americans Psychological Association. He recently authored and foreword for Alexander McLeland's forthcoming book, Criminalized Lives, HIV, and Legal Violence. He holds a Master of Science in Student Affairs and Higher Education from Indiana State University and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and Management from Louisiana State University in Shreveport. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you all Mr. Robert Suttle. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hi, Charles. Good to see you.
Yes, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. It's been a pretty long day so far, but I get to end it with you and your audience, so I'm good today.
Well, we definitely appreciate you being here. Is there anything you need to that you'd like to add to your bio that I just read?
Oh, no, I think you pretty much summed it up. So thank you so much for sharing that with the audience.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clarify, the theme of our show, and we're going to dive right into the show.
Mhm.
When we talk about America in Black and White, this podcast delves into the heart of racial issues that continue to divide our nation, from the systemic discrimination to implicit bias. We confront uncomfortable truths in the hope of fostering understanding and change. And that's just when I look at the advocacy that you're doing, especially with the HIV, and the public health, advocacy that you do, it's like it's another part, another faction of the divide of the country that I think we really, really need to try to find some way to actually make this thing correct. So, as we dive into this, can you tell us what brought you to your advocacy? What made you want to do this?
Thank you for your question. What brought me to my advocacy, or what made me want to do this? Simply because I faced an injustice about 15 years ago. Um, yeah, about 15 years ago. And it had to do with the fact of me being a person who is living with HIV. I've been living with HIV for 20 years now. And it was an experience that I felt just wasn't right. And this is outside of the stigma around HIV. I mean, obviously, this is just one form of it. But this particular experience that I'm talking about is the criminalization of HIV, which, of course, at the time, I didn't know anything about it as HIV criminalization. And issue is something that is not, or at least at that time, was not well known. And it's probably not as well known to many people who may be hearing about this for the first time, or they may be have some sort of awareness around it, but doesn't know exactly what it is. However, if it's because it is related to HIV, I think most people feel like some things should be done to people who are intentionally, as folks say, spreading HIV.
Mhm.
And so was an experience that I was having, and something that I never thought would happen to me. And so when it did, when I was released from prison and just didn't know what I was going to do with my life, I felt this need to really get the word out, because the message for people who are Black, the message for people who are gay, living with HIV, people who are formerly incarcerated, then these narratives are always negative. And it's unfortunate that as a person living with HIV, that that is even criminalized. And so it's not just enough of our Black bodies being criminalized. It's now your health status as a Black person living with HIV, gay, formerly incarcerated, and from the South. And so many people probably have not put all this together. And so that's why I'm here speaking about it, because again, I recognize that it's injustice, considering how HIV is so prevalent in the South and it impacts Black communities, marginalized communities. And I had to speak up, not only for myself, but for my people. Because I, again, I didn't feel like I could go forward with the narrative that is already out there. And my intention is to set the record straight about who we are as a people, particularly Black gay men. Yeah, so that is what brought me really into the work. That is my sole purpose, is to counter the narrative and to also bring awareness to this issue.
Can you tell us a little bit more in depth about this criminalization? Because I'm sure, as you mentioned earlier, that there are an enormous amount of people that really don't know what this is, what this means. Can you be a little bit more in depth and give us a little bit more of some examples as to what's happening with this criminalization?
Yeah, HIV criminalization, in a nutshell, is like if a person who is living with HIV know that they're living with HIV, which should not be a crime if you know that you're living with HIV. However, people living with HIV who are in care, on treatment, and cannot transmit the virus to a person, if they are engaged in any type of behavior that would otherwise be legal, but because of their HIV status and because of certain behaviors that are now considered illegal simply because of a person's status, a person living with HIV can be held criminally liable for actually engaging in any type of sexual behavior. And if accused of not disclosing prior to engaging in that type of behavior, then that person can be criminally liable simply because they know they were living with HIV, and it is assumed that they chose not to disclose it, and therefore we're criminally liable. And it's really just that easy. Many people think that if you just disclose it, or if you share your status with someone, then that should be it. Well, most people probably are thinking that no one is actually having sex or engaging in any type of sexual activity or any consensual sexual relationships with people living with HIV. And the answer to that is that they are. However, I think many people are embarrassed, could be embarrassed by it, and or whatever the reasons are. And so it can become a he said, or he said, she said word. Because again, I don't think no one wants to sort of let it get out that they're actually involved in having sex with someone that's living with HIV, which is unfortunate. But that is my assumption, that people are ashamed and of it. And so when it comes to accusations, um, they come in all sorts of ways, and one of them is through relationships, through any type of sort of consensual, casual relationship experience.
Wow. So when I hear you say that, I think of two things. I think of the stigma, and I also think of what if somebody wanted to come up with a lie and just say, "Oh, well, I did not know, and he or she had sex with me, didn't tell me, and they have HIV." So is this like how the criminalization works?
That is one way. That is one way of how it happens. I can't think of. I'm just like flabbergasted because there's just so many ways that people come up with these reasons why they choose to have someone prosecuted, and so there isn't just one particular way, but usually they arise out of consensual sexual casual relationships, and if a person has not is accused of not disclosing it, then if there's some idea that they are maliciously trying to harm someone. And what I want people to understand is that this particular phenomenon doesn't require criminal intent. It doesn't take in consideration whether a condom was used or whether a person was in care and receiving treatment. Um, it doesn't take consideration whether, because they're on treatment and in care, that they were able to achieve an undetectable viral load, which means they cannot transmit the virus to another person. These things are not even taken consideration in court, so we can't think that the public is fully aware of this. There was an article that came out talking about the health literacy of Americans, which is very low. And that stood out to me because that speaks to my issue, the work that I do in terms of bringing awareness that many people are acting out of fear of things that they don't understand, meaning they don't understand the real risk and routes of transmission of HIV. They don't understand how effective the treatment is. They don't understand the concept of U equals U. Um, Meaning that if a person is able to achieve an undetectable viral load, they cannot transmit the virus to the other person. So most people think about HIV/AIDS from the 80s, which I understand that was such a different time than it is today. And so I understand the fear. I mean, we just went through whole COVID experience, which was very frightening, which is almost similar to HIV, but very different. You know, HIV is, of course, transmitted through activity, through fluids and such, whereas COVID was more of an airborne um, experience. And so COVID, anybody could come from anyone, could contract it, and of course it would spread from person to person. But with HIV, it's different. It's a lot more difficult to transmit the virus unless the person was um, uh, had a high viral load, highly infectious. But most people today are receiving care if they have access to it, and care and treatment if they have access to it. And so a lot of that fear that once existed back in that time, we don't have to be as afraid. And I say that in that way simply because anytime you're either faced with a diagnosis, you're going to feel some kind of way. You're going to have some type of fear. And of course, you're going to be afraid of things that you don't know. But today, there's no excuse for us not knowing anything about HIV, just like there's no excuse for us not knowing anything about COVID and such. And so, with all the information out there, it is something about the fact that the health literacy rate is still low amongst Americans, and that is problematic. And it is again because of that, people. I'm believing people will choose to remain ignorant to things that they should be aware, especially if they're sexually active. And I'm sure most Americans are still sexually active. And so these are things that they need to know and around the criminalization, but also around the care and treatment that's available to them so that they have options now For people living with HIV, there's options. There's medications that we can take for we can achieve an undetectable viral load, cannot transmit the virus. Then there's people who are negative. There's pre and post. I'm getting this mixed up. I want to say it right, at least for your audience. There's pre and post exposure prophylaxis, PrEP and PEP, that people can take if they find themselves having exposure to HIV.
Well, there's what before I move on to my next question, I have another follow up here with this. Is that when you mentioned about people in the knowledge in public health, and just things that they should know in general. Can you tell our audience why is it you think that in the underserved communities that it seems like being highly infectious, where most of the infection is, why is it that people are not seeking the knowledge that's needed in order to be a whole lot better about this?
Well, let me add. I don't think, and I don't know if you meant maybe you didn't mean to say say it the way you said. I don't think the infections are high within the
Well,
marginalized communities,
right.
because I mean they're just a community that's mostly impacted simply because they may lack access to the services or care and treatment that we all need. Right. I actually believe that it's not only people living with HIV that's driving the rates of infection. It's probably people that aren't being tested, people who are haven't taken the time to face the reality of whether or not, that they might have been exposed to HIV, simply because they just never got tested, or maybe they just don't care. And so therefore, it's people who are unaware of where they stand with their sexual health. And I feel like that is probably what's driving the rates infections. But unfortunately, we as people living with HIV get blamed for everything. And yet the numbers have not changed, or they go up or they go down. I think they're down in certain communities. However, it's not zero. They haven't gotten to zero. And I wonder why. So clearly it's not us. But why people may not get the information. Again, the health literacy. There's not a lot of intention going around to really support people in a holistic kind of way in terms of them understanding what's available to them if they find themselves facing a life-changing situation with their health. And so I think it's been the same message over and over again. I think it's been that this phenomenon around HIV only happens to certain people, when we know that it happens to everybody. It's not just a gay community disease. It is something that impacts everybody. And I think people have really, we live in a very individualistic country. And so if we only look out for ourselves, and so we don't really see ourselves as part of other communities. And so therefore, there's no need for information to for us to pay attention to the information that we need, simply because there's no demand for it. And so, and it is, put on the fact that, again, if we can identify people living with HIV, identify communities that live with HIV, then we feel like, well, that's where we should target. We should target those communities, the gay community, the sex worker community, the trans community, the Black community, and not recognize that we don't just live single issue lives. It's not just about treating us with pills and medication. There's so many other issues that should be of concern in terms of education and housing and employment. So people are trying to live their lives. And so I don't really think many folks are really paying attention to the times. They think of HIV/AIDS as something back in the day. In fact, they may say, is that still a thing today? That's still around. That's still an issue. So I think that's the answer.
Well, and I thank you for the correction. I didn't mean to say that way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share your journey into public health activism and HIV/AIDS advocacy?
Hmm. Well, I have to say, I don't consider myself a public health person. I don't have a master's in public health. I probably wouldn't do too well there because I have a sort of a love-hate relationship around public health. Because my point with that is that when we know the truth, when we know treatment works, and we know how effective it is, and we know how communities are suffering, and yet we work as public health professionals or even social workers and so on and so forth. And yet we are allowing people who are facing a health issue face trauma, continue to face trauma as around HIV criminalization. And so I find that very problematic. And so I don't know if I'll ever consider myself a public health person, although I do talk about these things. Um, but my journey has been quite rewarding. I'm glad I took a step of faith to move forward, even when I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. Um, and what I did was I decided to learn more about it, more about this thing that's impacting my life, this thing that changed my life, the thing that caused me to lose my job and to go to prison for 6 months and also have to face issues around the sex offender registry because this particular issue in certain states requires sex offender registration for years. And so I'm glad that I took that step because it has made the difference. And people have told me how much they appreciate what the work that I do, probably even if they don't fully understand it, but they understand. Obviously, there's an injustice there. And um, so it led me to co-found an organization called the Zero Project. And through that organization, like myself, we connected with many other people that were impacted by HIV criminalization experiences in other states. And so through that organization, we were able to elevate and amplify the voices of those that were impacted by HIV criminalization. And I still work with quite a few of those people today in other ways. I'm also the chair of the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation Council of Justice Leaders. And so through that platform, I'm able to continue to work with those community of impacted people and also, again, work through this campaign to amplify our voices and also the message around why HIV should not be a crime or why HIV is not a crime. And so, and through that, through my advocacy, I've been able to connect with some larger groups around the world. And so between the global work as well as the work here in the US and throughout the states, it's been quite a rewarding experience to connect with community and also hear their needs and concerns, because there are things that I've never experienced as a marginalized person. However, as a Black gay man, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be living with HIV. And so it helped me really connect and have compassion for my other community members that are going through similar, if not more, egregious and harmless, egregious and harmful practices and enforcement of whether it's through HIV criminalization or any other forms of criminalization.
Wow, that's a lot of work, and I want you to know that at least from my perspective, I mean, I give you kudos for that because we have to have somebody that's at least got some skin in the game that
Mhm.
can try to filter out as much as possible to those that really want to get it but don't know how. So
Right.
I
Right.
appreciate you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's important because there's again the narrative is out there, and it's bad that this is what we have to live with in today around HIV. And I'm tired of it. I'm really tired of it, and I hope more people become tired of it. And um, you never know when it's going to be your day that you're going to be faced with something, and so it's so important to be on the up and up about around issues that impact your lives because you never know who's making those decisions, and usually it's decisions from people who aren't like you, who either not your race, either aren't living with HIV, who are not your gender, or so on and so forth. Um, and as we can see today with what's happening around women's reproductive health and justice issues, I mean, it's right in front of us. And so if, again, it may be my day today, but it could be yours tomorrow. And so it's so important that we as a community know what's going on because the people we elect to represent us, a lot of them don't have our best interests at heart, especially around when it comes to health issues. But legislators are quick to want to, be hard on HIV, which I don't understand. But I think it's because it's easier to be hard on that in terms of makes them like they're tough on crime. But HIV should not be a crime. No person's health status should ever be a crime. It should never be a crime. It should not even been done like this in the first place.
Mhm.
But yet there were people who biases, who religious beliefs, and so on and so forth allowed them, and their power, the access to power, allowed them to be in around tables and make decisions for us, even when we were unaware that this was happening. And so, as a result, you get hundreds to thousands of people whose lives have been changed over the years, over decades, since these laws were enacted.
Wow. So, what inspired you to become, this advocate for for the decriminalization? Because I know you said that you had went through some things, but was it something a little bit more than that that sparked that within you, or what was it in general?
It's pretty much what I said earlier in terms of just the narrative and righting the wrong. Of course, the person that pressed charges against me, I've not spoken to that person or had any contact with that person. So I don't necessarily carry any resentment. Plus, the court says no contact. But to me, this is not even about that person in terms of what they chose to do that impacted me. Um, that I realized this issue is bigger than the both of us. And so yes, it was about my experience, but it was also the experience that could happen to millions of people living with HIV. Because when I'm talking about HIV criminalization, most people think, well, what about that one? Or what about people who do this? Or what about people who don't disclose? Well, there are millions of people living with HIV, millions. And I don't think that's the way that millions of people living with HIV choose to live their lives, thinking about how they're going to transmit the virus to another person. But the way the laws are written, they're written for us to not be able to have sex. They used to criminalize gay people back in the day for just being gay. And when they could, and when those laws kind of, died down or weren't as enforced, they needed to find some stronger ways to prosecute people. And it just so happened that AIDS happened back in the 80s, right as the time when laws to criminalize gay people were not as enforced. And so I feel like the AIDS epidemic coming was just another opportunity for them to be able to prosecute or find ways to come down harder on gay people, on sex workers, on trans people, um, and it was through HIV. And so, if you're a sex worker in a state that may arrest you for being a sex worker, but then if you happen to be living with HIV and they test you and you test positive, there could be sentence enhancements that can happen. There are 30 plus states that have these laws, and so most people may be living in an HIV specific law state, or they may be living in a state where they prosecute you under general criminal laws, and it could be anywhere from murder or um, bioterrorism or aggravated assault, those sorts of things. And so, um, this is again a phenomenon, and I feel like it's another way to criminalize Black people, particularly Black gay men. Um, Simply because again they had the war on drugs and so now this is the war on infection, and it is continuing on into the 21st century, unfortunately, even with all the tools that we have now to where everyone can use to either manage their chronic health disease um, with HIV or to prevent them from contracting HIV. But yet we still feel the need, these states still feel the need to hold on to these laws, and I wonder why. I wonder why. It's become a benefit now, and so of course there have been a few states that have definitely modernized their laws or even repealed. Illinois was the state that repealed their law, so those are good wins when you can get them, which supports my resolve that we can actually change these laws. and that they're totally unnecessary. And so to see the changes happen across the country, we still have many more states to come, particularly in the South. We know that things can change. And so, yeah, but there's no need for us to hold on to these laws. They don't do anything but continue to oppress people and change their lives. So we can't do prevention and prosecute. We either pick one or the other. And as I always say, if we want people to legally share their status, then we need to make it legally safe for them to do that. And unfortunately, it is not safe to do that. And to people who want to say, well, what about those ones that don't disclose? I'm not saying people living with HIV always are disclosing, but look at the circumstances. You know, are you someone that people can trust to be able to share something like that um, with? Can they trust? Can a person with HIV trust you with that information? And one, are you literate? You know, where's your health literacy on HIV? Is it low? Is it medium? Is it high? And if you can't answer that question, then that means you need to go do some more learning. Um, and unfortunately, it is not safe for people living with HIV to disclose. We want to disclose our status. We want the support. We want to feel supported, but you can't feel supported when people are being irrational, people are being irate, unreasonable, all the things. And so, again, I couldn't encourage a person to disclose if they're living in situations where people are not being compassionate and supportive. And many people want to say, well, if you don't disclose, then that means you hiding something, you're deceiving, being deceitful. Well, people have lied to all of us. Legislators lie to us daily. Our parents, our family, we lie to each other. But do we call the police because the person lied on us or lied to us? So I'm just saying that just to think about it, not to make light of it, but just to really think about what we are saying. And right now, I will say that HIV is being looked at in certain states as sexual violence, as a form of sexual violence, as a form of sexual assault. In other words, conflating sexual assault and HIV criminalization. And these are two different things. A sexual assault is more of a violent rape, molestation. HIV specific laws come from sex offenses. And so it's a broader category of offenses simply because people can choose to decide which offense it could be to make illegal. And in this case, they were making HIV, a person with HIV, knowingly engaging in sex or not disclosing that to be illegal. And so I wanted to throw that out there because these are just some current experiences that spaces that I've been in where this has been an issue. And so just wanted to lift that up because it people just get it confused, and it's so important to look at these things through the lens in which they should be looked at and not exaggerated. So.
Well, let me just ask you this because, with all the vast knowledge and the information that you have you thought about, getting together with one of your legislators for the state that you're in and maybe passing some law or writing some new bill that could alleviate and take some stresses off of this situation? Because if people in the LGBTQ community are feeling that kind of pressure, something else really needs to be done. Have you thought about that, or are you doing that?
Oh, absolutely. I've thought about it for a long time. And this experience that I just spoke about, conflating sexual assault and HIV criminalization, was out of Louisiana and back in April when I went to give testimony. But we do have coalitions. And I did co-found a coalition back in 2016 in my home state of Louisiana. And they're currently active and doing all the things to organize and to address this issue in the state. However, and they were able to at least find a legislator that would try to introduce a bill just recently. However, from my observation inside of that chamber, those people really weren't necessarily interested in the conversation that we were trying to have in terms of decriminalizing this. They really wasn't, and so. So it's going to become a bit tougher, or has become a bit tougher for Louisiana, those that coalition in Louisiana to really address this issue. It's not impossible. They just have to think of different strategy. But we can't just assume that our legislators like, oh yeah, sure, like tell me what's wrong and I'll fix it. I'll change it. There are some legislators just not, if they are not interested in changing it, they're not, you can give them all the signs and all the facts. Um, they're just not interested in it. So you have to devise another strategy to speak to it in a way that they, in a language in which they understand. And sometimes that is around finances or whatever the issue is for them. And as we can see, a lot of those conservatives, evangelical white men, they're not the ones that are in favor of changing anything. And so left that. I remember leaving that space feeling empty and unseen because I'm sharing with them about my experience under the law, and they didn't really care about it. They cared more about those cases where someone who perhaps may have raped someone but happened to be living with HIV. Um, so they find that it's justifiable to continue to have these laws because when you have people from the district attorney's office who are coming advocating against us. Um, they're okay with us getting treatment. However, they're not okay with not having this law on the books. Um, and their reason is to go to the extreme and not really look at these more of consensual relationship situations, where a person had an undetectable viral load could not transmit the virus to another person. They didn't care about any of that. So I have been interested in this since day one. However, the reality is, again, as I said, these people, we're not even speaking the same language to a lot of these legislators because, again, for whatever reason, this is their way. One of the many ways they get to stay in office is by continuing to come down. In fact, it's not even so much about the community; it's about expanding police's ability to enforce this law to protect them, to protect law enforcement and first responders. So at this point, there's no protections for people living with HIV. There's no one in let's say supporting people living with HIV as it relates to this law. Whether it's Republican or Democrat, a lot of them pretty much go along with it without even taking consideration all the things that I sort of highlighted here. But yet they will expand the law for law enforcement to protect them, to give them a more reasons to be able to bring charges based on someone's HIV status.
Oh,
That's ridiculous.
that's way past ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look, how do you envision the future of HIV and AIDS advocacy in the United States in the future?
Ooh, that's a good question. Right now I don't know if you've heard or if audiences have heard about ending the epidemic. Well, as a person living with HIV, you're not really ending the epidemic for me because I'm already living with HIV. However, you perhaps can try to end the epidemic for those that are not, which, I'm all for that. However, I don't know how you're going to actually end this. But I guess you can try. But the thing is that we're not taking into consideration the experiences. And with criminalization being one of them, we talk about treatment, prevention, getting tested, but rarely do you hear them promoting anything around educating people around decriminalize or HIV criminalization, um, or the need to decriminalize it. In fact, it's not even part of the conversation, or it's more of a, well, we know that it goes on, but it doesn't, it's not up there with testing, treatment, and prevention, unfortunately. And so, you, when are we going to talk about ending stigma, ending HIV stigma? When are we going to talk about ending HIV criminalization? So I I just don't believe in this ending the epidemic thing. And then you have to define that. What is that? What does ending the epidemic look like, and for whom? And so if we're seeing how our community, Black and Brown communities, are impacted just now. Like, what is it? How much better is it going to be when they're ending the epidemic? So I say that to say, because there are people who are involved in many of these campaigns around that are doing advocacy. Um, However, let's do it holistically. Let's not just focus on those components that I mentioned. We need to add criminalization in there to at least acknowledge it, that it's happening, particularly when ending the epidemic is concentrated in certain jurisdictions that have consider high rates or high numbers of people of HIV infection. Um, and yet there's no consideration or perhaps no funding to address decriminalizing HIV in those same jurisdictions. So those of us who are working in community and working in coalitions have to do that work ourselves, because it's not a part of sort of this national strategy around in the epidemic. And if it is mentioned in the national HIV/AIDS strategy, it's a line or two, and even the CDC has gone as far as creating a tool for states to look at and address their policies around HIV criminalization. And but that only comes when the entity has intent and willfulness to want to change, to make the change that needs to be happen. And um, so it's really the community. It's the communities that are representing communities of people living with HIV, the national organizations that are really doing that heavy work to work with coalitions in various states to really address the HIV criminalization and decriminalization in those states.
Now, let me ask you this, because I think we need to delve a little bit deeper into that. Could you discuss the impact of the HIV criminalization on marginalized communities?
Yeah, I'll share that, since I didn't share it for myself, other than the fact that I've gone to prison. And so, for a person who's living with HIV, who perhaps is gay, living with HIV, uh, finds himself facing prosecutions, they will serve time in prison. It's a felony, so they will likely have a felony record, which can impact their ability to get gainful employment, or it impacts their ability to get adequate housing. There's no guarantee that they're going to have a fair hearing. One, because they can't afford to have an attorney, that they're actually paying, that could really give the attention to this case. And so we're pretty much subjected to public defenders, which is good to have that representation. However, you may face lawyers that aren't as familiar with this issue. And so you don't get, so there's a chance you may have the unfair representation in court, years in prison. Also, in some states, you may be required to be on the sex offender registry. I think there's 5 states still that may require a sex offender registry. And so with those things, on top of just being of color and being coming from marginalized communities, and then to have sort of these collateral consequences levied against you. This is the impact that it's having on those communities. And so it just makes it even harder for you to be able to move through the world, through this country. And I feel that every day, simply through my own experiences, which is why I continue to do the advocacy that I do. I want to be able to expose all of it, and be able to talk about it and share my experience with others, to know that, to uncover, I think that's the thing, that while we should talk about these experiences, because if we don't talk about them, then it means that we're okay with it. And that's why every marginalized person should be able to come forth and share their experiences, so that we can uncover the injustice that's happening throughout. Because stigma isn't just about HIV. People living with HIV face stigma on every level of our being, and no human should have to go through that. It's a violation of our human rights, and it's just unjust. And again, I'm on a mission to bring as much awareness, not just about what I go through, but just what the experience of what people can potentially go through. um, because I want folks to know, because I'm amazed that many people aren't aware of what goes on. And I guess because we're so distracted by so many things, which I can totally understand. People are trying to live their lives, but there's some of us that aren't able to do that simply because um, either laws or policies that are next. And we need more people to be aware to help us address these things.
Let me ask you this because you said so many things there that you was just unpacking. But I want, if you don't mind, if you can share this with our audience. I mean, really, can you tell them the impact that this has had on you and how it has affected your life to this point today?
Yeah. It has changed me, no doubt. I definitely noticed the change. And I know that I definitely went through a traumatic experience. And thankfully, I've not had any type of, uncontrolled experience, rage or what have you. Or at least I've tried to channel it in a very positive way. And that way has been through the advocacy. That way has been to making myself as knowledgeable as possible. Um, it has been that the way that I have done it is at the sacrifice of my family and my own personal happiness. Um, and I don't know if that's because of many other things about me, but I know that this particular issue sets me up in a different way because when it comes to relationships, when it comes to talking about what I do, this is what I do. And so many people aren't prepared for the things that I have to share because they're like, oh, this is a lot, and it's me being open, and I've become, I guess a good thing is that I've become very open, but I guess so up to maybe a bit too open that it makes me perhaps not the ideal person that someone would probably want to date or feel like they can have a future with, simply because of how we look at people who are marginalized, formerly incarcerated, or living with HIV. Depending on who you meet, people have their thing or their preference about people. And in some way, it's saddened me. There are days that I've been very sad. There have been days I've been very mad. Even today, not this day, but just in these times, I get very upset. But I've learned that I just need to write about it. I need to talk about it. Um, and I know people have over the years saying, "Oh, well, thank you for sharing your story." And I know it must be hard, but it has been really therapeutic for me to be able to talk about it, to articulate it. Because when you're going through it, you don't know. I remember just being in a state of shock and just quiet and just trying to process what happened. And you don't have anybody there to tell you what you went through. You just going through it. And so I think with a little bit of my faith and just the education, I think my grandparents, they set me up really well. Even though they didn't know about this, but they set me up well in terms of being able to advocate for myself and advocate for what I need. And I think in some way it has definitely served me. And so um, yeah, I definitely have had my days, but I also have encountered experiences of other people who've had some hard days. I remember when I first started out, there were people who some had died by suicide because they couldn't handle the stress and the pressure that comes from this. And that is, again, something that has kept me going, remembering these people and their experiences, and as well as my own. So not discounting or not blocking out what I went through. I would say it's been tough, but um, I mean, somebody has to do it. I mean, there are people that have come before me who stood up and spoke up when it was time, and by their action, it has helped me and helped many of us at this time. And so, um, I always ask myself, why me? Why did it have to happen to me? Why can't I just have a life like other people? And there are days I do wake up that I just want that, but I recognize how important this is, and I know that I'll get my reward. whether it's on this side or on the other side. But I know that I can. If I stop today, I know that I did my part, and I did the best I could, and I tried to represent my community as well as my family in the most upright way that I could.
Well, I'm sure you have done that and you are still doing it. And I think if anybody is looking at you with the side eye in the wrong way, that's on them. That is not on you.
Yeah.
Because, brother, let me tell you something. You're special. Everybody that knows you, that deals with you, know that you're special, which is why they love being around you. But
Mhm.
those other folk, you can't speak for them because they're just ignorant in all the wrong ways.
Oh yeah.
I'm more than sure that
Mhm.
when that time comes that you're going to have the love of your life, that's going to happen naturally.
Mhm.
That's going to happen naturally. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Just keep doing what you do.
Oh yeah, yeah. I will. I have to. I mean, it's how I lasted this long, um, because that's a fight in me. And my grandmother would say, right always gonna win. And I remember just being as a child that remembering these sayings, and I'm so glad that she said them. I'm glad that my grandfather said things that he said because these are things that have carried me, and I know that they would be proud of me. Um, and it's just the thing to do. And yeah, so I have a fight in me that regardless of how tired and how upset I get, I have to keep going, because there are people's lives that there are that could be impacted, and if I can do anything about it, I'm going to do it. So, you know.
So tell us, what are the main objectives of your nonprofit organization?
Which organization? The Zero Project?
Your
Oh,
organization.
my organization. Oh, well, I'm not a nonprofit. I am an entrepreneur. Uh, uh, so I am in a consulting, independent consultant,
Oh,
and so I offer also consulting around advocacy. Many people I'm finding have been inspired by my advocacy, my ability to sort of take this, crazy situation and turn it into something positive. And so they're wanting to know how can they, build their advocacy brand, and so I'm excited about that, to be able to offer some insights into how people can get started in advocacy. And if they already are, how can they, improve or make it better, or what have you. So I'm here to offer everything that I've learned over the past decade, um, from working in nonprofits, working with community, working with advocacy groups. And also I do trainings on what HIV criminalization is. And there's so many different components to it. And so we could definitely specialize it, as to an audience or whatever it is, that they want to cover, whether it be like issues around disclosure or whatever, whatever its impact on communities and such. And also I do speaking engagements, which I thank you for reaching out to me, because my intent is not only to speak to the choir, because I've done that for a decade. I want to expand to reach new audiences, new people that are unaware. And so I thank you for seeking me out and inviting me to come and share my work and my experience, because this is what it's all about. It's about reaching. It's almost like spreading the gospel. You're not done until you reach, the ends of the earth. And so I'm still finding that even after a decade, there's still new people that are unaware because they were either younger or just in some other place where they just did not hear about it. So I know that there's opportunity out there for me for what I want to do and give back to the community, and solve problems, around advocacy and how to do it, how to talk about HIV criminalization and how to support people that may be going through this experience. Because a lot of times those folks don't know where to look or where to turn. I didn't have the support that someone could have today. I didn't have then. I definitely went through it by fire, and so I want to be able to offer that to people. So I'm hoping that if anybody finds somebody or run across someone, if you are facing threat of prosecution and based on your HIV status, or you know someone that is, you know, they can reach out, reach out to me, reach out to a national organization that's doing HIV advocacy work. They should be able to connect you to the right people that's doing this, and because that person have no idea what they're about to go through, and we need people to be able to tell us that, and that's what I wish I had. I had to learn what I went through a blog when I got out, and at the beginnings of when they were talking about the issue, but they never met many people who actually had gone through it. And of course, I'm not the first person that's ever been criminalized. There have been people who've been criminalized back in the 90s. We just don't know about them. And that was a different time. And so I'm definitely aware of that. And that's why, again, another reason why I choose to speak out in the 2000s, because this has gone on long enough. And but yeah, that is the extent of my work. So I'm willing to work with anybody on any type of initiative that brings advocacy and awareness, and I'm happy to come and speak. And yeah, just continue to do the training, the consulting, and the speaking. That is, and I write. I'm beginning to write more and speak more about what I do instead of out there on the ground. So yeah, that's kind of the period in which I'm in right now, because 20 years living with HIV and being older, you know, approaching middle age, I'm trying to be mindful of how I spend my life. And so just trying to make sure that I live a little as well, you know, even if it's as unconventional as it seems. But yeah, my intent is to write more and speak more on this, and hopefully on other platforms that will give me the leverage to, you know, speak to new people and bring awareness.
How does Zero support individuals living with HIV and AIDS?
Oh, Zero. Whatever I can do, Zero can do for you. That's why the organization was created, and I'm glad that it's now under new leadership to allow it to go even further and higher in the next 10 years. And so it's a national organization that's led by people living with HIV, for people living with HIV, and they continue to do advocacy year round. They actually host a HIV is Not a Crime training academy that happens every other year. And so it's going to be happening in 2025. So there's an opportunity that if you are someone that's interested in this issue, but you don't know a whole lot about it, but you know you want to be involved, you can volunteer and help with the conference planning. And there's all sorts of initiatives that the Zero Project leads throughout the year. One of their co-executive directors, Kamaria Laffrey, founded the HIV is Not a Crime Awareness Day. They also have a social justice training institute. So if you are someone that wants to get involved in advocacy, you know, they have an opportunity where you can apply to become a part or a cohort member, and then graduate and become an alumni of the Zero Project Justice Institute. So those are just sort of the main initiatives that they have, and Zero is also part of the Health Not Prisons Collective, which is a collective organization that are doing work on behalf of the communities most impacted by HIV criminalization. And so there's plenty of opportunities for people to get involved, and make sure that I share those resources with you. So if there's a way we can, I don't know, get them posted or send them out or whatever, you know, we can do that. So yeah,
Definitely. Can you discuss the role of of Zero in advocating for policy changes related to HIV and AIDS?
Well, Zero definitely is in the business of HIV decriminalization, and so they work with coalitions. They well, that's most of the working with coalitions, but also they're part of other public policy bodies like the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, which is a network of organizations of people living with HIV. So they definitely have a presence and continue to have a presence even today, being a part of those bodies. And again, those initiatives that I raised, Zero leads those initiatives, the HIV Training Academy, HIV is Not a Crime Training Academy, the Zero Project Justice Institute. And so, so between that, you know, working with community on the ground, with coalition building, strategic planning, as well as working in the policy areas. Yeah, that is what they do, and I'm probably missing something, but that is that is the bread and butter of the Zero Project. Yeah.
Okay. So, what challenges have you faced in your advocacy work, and how have you overcome them?
Ooh, the challenges. One, probably just being boxed and seen as just a person that's been impacted, and good for their story, which, it's fine to share your story, but I've become quite the expert at this simply because I've lived this issue and not. So it's important for me to be in leadership. It's important for me to be part of the decision making and continue to be part of the things that continue to impact me. So, which is why it was so important for me to build my platform as an independent, um, um, because it represents the resilience. It represents me uh, taking taking hold of the things that I've done over the past decade, and um, builds your credibility, because it's, and I say these things because it's so easy to look at people living with HIV as helpless, like they can't do for themselves, or if you're a formerly incarcerated person, that you just you can't do anything. And so it's important that I continue to share not just my criminalization story, but my whole entire story as a black as a black person, as a black gay man in the United States, because we are either seen as invisible, or we're seen as a criminal. Um, and as I've tried to advocate for myself around the sex offender registry in various states, um, I'm not even. It's almost like I'm not even considered human. They just look at what's on paper, whatever the experience was, whatever the notes that they wrote about the case. They don't know. They don't take into consideration who I am today, which is unfortunate. And so someday I will write about this, so that people can understand that. Um, but yeah, I think that would be the major one. And my experience back in April when I went to Louisiana, and how I shared that, which was important that I share it and get it on record. But just the fact that other human beings, uh, and there's probably, I remember one legislator, she did say that she acknowledged my work, which was surprising to me because I didn't expect that. But for the rest of them that didn't speak up, they could care less about me being someone that was impacted by those laws. In fact, they probably say, "Oh, the law works." In fact, we have one right here. Um, so those are just a few things that have kind of bothered me. The registry thing, how I have to continue to be on that, even here in New York City, for 10 more years. Louisiana was 15 years, but when I moved here to New York, and registered it, I didn't realize that I was signing up for another 20 years. And this was the thing that bothered me the most, is that they, in the briefs here from the DA, they tried um, to articulate this as if like I left Louisiana to avoid the law, of being on the register. And that's so far from the truth. In fact, I've gone through everything that was required of me in Louisiana, in Pennsylvania, even in DC, and now living in New York. So where was I running from? Where was I running from? And so I think that's, if anything, just makes me even more upset, because I'm like, they don't even acknowledge me as a human being. Um, so, I could go on that, but those are just a few things that have impacted me around my advocacy. And so I'm happy to be able to do what I do, and is giving me so much satisfaction. And I hope that it continues to inspire other people to do the thing that they need to do for them.
Well, what I'm going to tell you is that, I'm here in Georgia, and but some of those things that you said that they do have at Zero, I definitely would love to get that information, because I think there's some impact that I could start to help make a lot, help a lot of people to make some impact, down here in this metro Atlanta area, which is the major part of the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And so I definitely would love to get that information in particular, and just a whole lot of the other stuff, that you may have, because I think the referencing to all of those things, they impact people different. But I think as they start to branch out and they all have different legs, I think they start to connect and they pull everybody in together as one.
Yeah, I will say there have been some. Georgia has modified their law, um, and forgive me, I can't keep up with every state to know exactly what the modifications were. I think it did make the law a little bit better. However, the law is still there, and so I can definitely share that information with you. I think what's important that it's one thing to we should tell people that be aware of the law in their state. But then when the law modifies, you still should be aware of what the law is or what it modified to or what it changed to, so that you have the understanding of where it was and where it is. Now, if it's been repealed, then it's repealed. But that's important too. And so that's another part within our sort of broader advocacy that we have to make sure that we continue to go back and educate people about how the law changed today, so that people are aware of that. And so I just want to at least make note that there is a coalition in Georgia that has done some work over the years, and were able to make some change, which has been better, but it's still the law is still there. And um, so again, it's important to know where the law stands today, because that's part of this work, is that sometimes you don't always get everything you want in the first couple of years. And so you take the wins and then you come back and you just get back at it again and see how much farther you can go with it. So yeah, so that's just as one example. So thank you for bringing that up, because I want people to know that there's have been changes in certain states. So what's important is that you also understand what those changes are and know what the law is today.
So, how do you collaborate with other HIV/AIDS advocacy organizations to amplify your impact?
Mm, that's something that's kind of where I am right now. I currently work with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, also work with the HIV Justice Network, and just continue to work with the Suttle Project, the health, which is part of again the Health Not Prisons Collective, and so just through just I don't know how to articulate the connection, but I'm staying connected to these organizations and working with in different capacities. But my primary work is through the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, and of course the HIV Justice Network, and as well as the Health Not Prisons Collective through the People Living with HIV caucus. And so I was a steering committee member on that caucus that looks at the federal issues, policy issues, and make recommendations. For based on people, based on our community, um, and so yeah, and so my intent is to continue to branch out, because although the organization that I mentioned are my base, like I want to branch out to be able to show other organizations how they can either plug in or benefit from the work that the base the organization that I have a base with, because the work that we do is work that um, is what other organizations can take and make modify or make it their own, so that they're speaking to their community, to their audiences. And so I feel like my job is also to be a connector, and so try to connect the dots and connect people, connect organizations um, together, because that's what we need. We need the infrastructure, we need the network to be able to address these laws, and build the advocacy. So,
Okay. Could you share a success story or achievement from your advocacy efforts?
ooh, that's probably something I'm not very good at, because I'm very, very modest and
It's okay to wag your tail. You can
yeah.
do
I like to think I like to think that, well, one thing I know as I'm reflecting, because I want, I plan, I'm in the process of writing my memoir about this, um, is that I came at the right time. I came into this at the right time when this movement was getting started here in the US. And although it was being talked about in other parts of the world, um, I came at the right time. And so I know that there's a place for me. I know there's a space for me in history on this. Um, that's why it's important for me to tell the story, because I don't know if folks will tell the story if I was to, die today or pass on, or what have you. But I was there. I was there, and I contributed in a great way. Um, and I helped build some things, and I helped inspire some people, because a few of them have told me along the way, and that's been the most rewarding thing, to hear it back. Because I know where I've been, but to hear people say, yeah, Robert, it's because of you. And I'm like, oh, me? Like, and I realized, like, that I needed that. I needed that, because you go so long with just doing, you just want, if people appreciate what you do. And it's not to give me praise or glory, but to at least to acknowledge that, wow, Robert, if you had not said something, Robert, if you had not come here or did that, we wouldn't, it would have known. So it makes me know that what I've done was not in vain. And now there's so many people now that they can talk about it. They're doing their thing. They're doing their part to bring awareness and standing up. And so I feel like my biggest achievement is that I rung the alarm, and some people paid attention. and now we have the movement, and changes have been made. And that's why I say, I think if I die right now, I would be fine, because I know that of all the places and times I've spoken, just all those times, they add up. And um, it has to do something, and I'm glad to see that it has.
So, before let me just do a follow up on that, because again, you're dropping nuggets as you're going through this, which is wonderful. But I want you to just visualize this, and I want you to tell the audience this. What is it that 75-year-old Robert would tell this Robert right now?
Ooh, 75-year-old Robert. Gosh, I the words that come to my mind is, I kept the faith, and I know that it's more spoken in faith circles or what have you, but kept the faith in believing that what I thought was wrong, what I thought was unjust, um, that I did the right thing, that I was on the right side of history um, with it, and I just wasn't out there just doing something, but that I kept the faith, and that I, if 75-year-old me would be proud. it's proud that I did it, because hopefully by the time I'm 75, that this will be so different that it will look back and be like, wow, they actually did that, and look what we were able to change. And so yeah, so I pray that I can live that long to be able to see the change. I'm glad to see it now, a little bit of it. It's almost like Martin Luther King. He said he may not get there with us on the mountaintop, but he's seen he's seen the things. And so yeah, I've seen a few things, and just hope to be able to see more.
You'll get there. I
Yeah.
know that for a fact. What advice would you give individuals interested in becoming involved in HIV/AIDS advocacy?
Ooh, good question. I want to tell them, do it with your heart. You have to have heart and compassion for what you do. I don't do this for like fame or anything. It was never that for me. It's about truth. It's about justice. And I guess that's for me, because I've been that close to injustice, that so I come into it in a different way. But my intent, what I tell people is that some of us have had to sacrifice some things to do what we do, and I don't want that for the next person. I want you to be able to come into this with your life intact, not impacted by the justice system, and being a person that can take every resource opportunity that they have and throw it into their advocacy, through your education. And I've been fortunate to get my education as well. Um, However, when you face criminal charges or conviction, it does impact you. However, you can still use that and leverage it, but you got to know how. You can be creative with it. But to people coming in, you can do this. Find the thing that you're passionate about, and go with it. Connect with people who are like-minded, like you, that can help develop you, and you can develop each other. Um, and one, I would say, advocacy does not pay. It does not pay. So you kind of have to be strategic and smart about how you make your living. Um, you can still do other things and still do advocacy. In fact, I encourage it. Whether you're in school or whatever employment or background or work field you're in, you can still do advocacy. You may not be able to do it full time or in a manner like some other people do, but you'll be able to do it in your own way, and be able to contribute. And also know that, as this saying goes, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So be prepared to be in it for the long haul. Yeah.
How do you engage with policymakers to influence decisions regarding HIV and AIDS related issues?
Ooh, well, I would say that I have been a part of congressional briefings. I've been a part of uh, spaces where we met with um, Congress people, in terms of what I'm talking about, HIV criminalization law. These are state laws, but we also try to advocate for a federal law called the Repeal Act, which will, if we were able to pass that piece of legislation, it will compel states to review their laws, and hopefully make the necessarily changes. But unfortunately, as each over the past decade, Representative Barbara Lee has introduced that piece of legislation in many times. Even the White House, the president has spoken about decriminalizing HIV. So I've been fortunate to be in some spaces to give legislative testimony, and also to brief Congress people about those that are supporting the Repeal Act, as well as a few state legislators on these issues, and so, or supporting other people who are working with legislators, or even coalitions on this issue. And so, um, as much as I feel like that is necessary, um, I didn't do a whole lot of it, but I did enough of it to know that, I mean, if I'm needed, I'm happy to do it, or to work in those spaces, but it's not, there's a space for everybody. And I'd rather be able to work with somebody that's really going to do something, and not people that are just meeting for the sake of meeting to say that they met. I'm about legislators that are about moving things. And so, to not try to get upset with them, because they operate different. They speak a different language than what I would want to, but I am skilled enough to be able to communicate to them. And we do these advocacy events called AIDS Watch. So we go to the Capitol. And so I've been able to be in spaces where I do speak to the legislators, staff, around the issue of HIV criminalization, or just whatever it is that I'm tasked to talk about. And so, it stretches me. It is an opportunity that I feel like, if you get that opportunity, take it, because it's only going to help make your advocacy skills better, and it helps you improve and be able to adjust and speak to different audiences when called upon. So I'd rather be ready and prepared than not to have had the experience at all.
Well, you know something, with you having some skin in the game, I feel a whole lot better and a whole lot more comfortable,
All right.
because I'm very sure that, just over a period of time, it don't happen like yesterday, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that over a period of time, that, the effects and the things that you had a part of is going to make a difference.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that's
I,
what I think is so important about when people see you here today and know what Robert Suttle does, the name resonates. And so as the name resonates, everything else becomes, it just comes natural.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is my whole intent, for many reasons, because I just believe in doing good things, but then also too because of my my name, because of the experiences. I'm changing that. I'm taking control of my own narrative, and even if they don't want it, if the institutions and the state or governments don't want to acknowledge it, then I'm going to do my best to um, keep my name. My folks didn't raise me that to be a criminal, and so I just find it very disheartening for the world, or this country, or the institutions to do that to me. But I guess they don't owe me anything. But one thing I can do is speak out. Um, so that's what I'm going to do.
Well, hey, look here, you always got this platform.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you discuss any international initiatives or collaborations your organization participates in?
Yeah, the main one would be the HIV Justice Network, which is um, a body of experts internationally that speak on this issue around human rights, HIV criminalization, as well as other HIV related issues. And so that is one that I've been a part of the global advisory panel since 2019. But I also been a part of other bodies back in 2012 when we met for the HIV Justice Network to start it. And so um, I've been fortunate to connect with the founder of the HIV Justice Network, someone I followed even before I became right before my criminalization experience. Pause Magazine was one of those magazines that I looked in, and so a lot of those people that I saw in those magazines, I've met them now just over the years. So it's something I never expected that would ever happen, because I didn't foresee criminalization being an experience that I had. And so through that body, I've just been exposed to other entities around the world, that I've been able to give testimony at these high level policy meetings, which is kind of how I started. It wasn't me speaking in America or the United States. It was me being invited to come to Geneva, come to Oslo, to speak about this issue, as it was spoke about globally,
Wow.
um, and which sort of was the launching pad to come and address it here directly in the U.S. And so through that experience, just again over the past decade or so, I've been fortunate to be um, in that space, and also to understand how HIV criminalization has happened globally. It started here in the U.S., and then, like many other issues that happens here, it goes over to Africa or any other parts of the world, and then they end up having these crazy laws like they do in Uganda.
Oh yes, the
Being punished.
criminalization of
Yeah.
homosexuals, where they're actually killing people.
Yes.
And when that president signed that law, now I know that, I'm not a big advocate for people actually coming into somebody's house. But
Hmm.
my thing is that when you got somebody, or you have a country in particular that's actually clearly stating that it's persecuting people for being who they are,
Hmm.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so, pretty much, and when I say this, I mean a lot of people may not care for this, but it's basically the same as what we have right here in the US. It's the exact same thing.
Hmm.
But to just know that you can actually see that from a different angle. The
Yeah.
camera lens is totally different. And when you see that, there's nobody that should be for the criminalization and the destruction of any group of people
Right.
in any shape, form, or fashion. But when you have countries that coalesce together as a coalition to do that, that is the only reason why things like that happen. But until you can look the man in the mirror and say, I'm wrong, then it's never going to change, really. So, you have to get inside that system and you have to clean that cancer out.
Yeah.
And so when you start cleaning that cancer out, is when you start to see a little different. But just think about it. So now that you're internationally known,
A little.
and if you continue to go abroad and spread all this wonderful news and telling people, hey, this is the way this should be, then this is where you have to understand when you wear your hat stands out.
Yeah, I recognize that it was something I recognized a while back, that people are watching the U.S. and I know people think that, yeah, each country, those countries have their thing, but a lot of the stuff that happens or is inspired that by things that happen here in the U.S. Um, and so U.S. commits human rights violations left and right
All day,
all day
every
long, but yet we're looked at as the superpower of the world. And so I recognize, by me being who I am and speaking out against HIV criminalization in the U.S., it has inspired many around the world, particularly the Africans who are human rights defenders. Those people, I feel like well, I don't know, probably they really, because they deal what they have to deal with and live with on a daily basis. What the way I live is almost, magical, for the life that they want to live. And so I definitely do not take it lightly, the moments that I've spoken at the International AIDS Conference, particularly back in 2018. Um, um, and speaking before people who've coming from countries where, if they wouldn't be able to necessarily do that in such a way. And so I recognize the impact that has, and that's why I I do my best to represent and to be as, I don't know, transparent in what I do, because those some of those people do reach out to me and they thank me, um, and I also recognize the hardships that they are faced with in their countries. And so, um, yeah, I say all that to say that other countries, they do watch. They are watching us. They are
Mhm.
watching us. So.
In what ways do you address stigma and discrimination against individuals living with HIV and AIDS?
I just try to share my experiences. It's not always just about about criminalization, but just being transparent about it. Not Notice I said transparent and not honest, because people are like, well, thank you for being honest. Well, I'm not really being honest. I'm To imply being honest means that I'm probably lying or withholding information or something. It's not. I'm being very transparent. Um, so I try to be transparent, with the hopes that it can help somebody realize, like, this may be where you are right now, but you don't have to. You don't. Hopefully, they will understand that whatever it is that they're experiencing as it relates to stigma and discrimination, that that it's not right. Something's not right there, and hopefully they will be able to speak out about it, um, in whatever form or fashion, or take action that they need. So yeah, that's my strategy, to be as transparent and to make it look as good as possible. Yeah, to make it look as good as possible, because we deserve to live. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is, I tell people, keep living. Just you don't have to say a word to them, just live, and that will speak volumes. Yeah.
How do you ensure that your advocacy efforts are inclusive and representative of diverse communities affected with HIV and AIDS?
Oh, that is something that I wrestle with, most days, because um, I know I can't do everything. I'm not trying to do everything. I rather support people who are of other lived experience or identities to be able to do the thing that they need to do. Um, and so I try to stay in my lane. Um, this is what I try to do, but I am always mindful of their experience, because there's things I've had to learn, which I'm very appreciative of. Because some experiences I've encountered when I was incarcerated, of people of trans experience, and I didn't understand it because I didn't really have people around me before my prosecution experience. And so I'm grateful for just the exposure that I had to other people, to understand the things that they have to deal with, in addition to those that may be threatened by HIV criminalization. Um, but again, to just be a support as much as possible. And if I'm ever called to represent, um, you know, communities beyond just my Black gay identity, I want to be ready. I want to be prepared. But my intent is to really support and give I rather give a platform to those people so they can do what they do, and hopefully together we can do what is necessary, right? So.
Yes, sir. What strategies do you employ to raise awareness about HIV and AIDS prevention and treatment?
Gosh, treatment and prevention, it's not something I really talk about a whole lot, unless it's, 101. But it's not something that I write about or talk about publicly. And maybe I will, because I mean, living with HIV for 20 years, I do know something about about treatment, and because I go through my care and such. But I haven't really talked about it or wrote about it just yet. But I do try to encourage people, and again, just through living, being transparent through living, and showing them that you can get through it, especially if you're a newly diagnosed person. Just letting them know that, have hope, give them hope, that yes, whatever you're feeling and going through, it is valid, but it won't always be like that, because one day you're going to get tired and you're going to want to live. And I try to encourage people that you can and you will get there. And so I, again, try to be as transparent to say that the treatment works, and living 20 years and look at me, so hopefully that is enough to give people what they need, to continue to run, but also being mindful, allowing them to feel the things that they need to feel, not saying get over it and nothing like that, but just really helping them understand that they're on a journey. It's a process. Um, and also while making them aware of the HIV criminalization experiences. So, yeah, we need to give people hope.
Okay. And could you share any upcoming projects or campaigns your organization is working on?
Yeah, I will forever support the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation with their HIV is not a crime campaign. They're sort of taking a shift to go national now. So you may see more of the campaign in sort of a national way. They've definitely supported efforts in states and continue to, um, in different ways. They've held all types of social media initiatives. And so over the years, I've been a part of different sort of initiatives within the entire HIV is not a crime program. Health Not Prisons Collective is not necessarily a campaign; it's a collective organization. But I mean, they continue to do the work day in and day out, and they just happen to be able to do it together. And so those campaigns, and I'm probably forgetting something, but also supporting the equality groups campaigns as well. And so it may not be I work primarily within the HIV space, but I'm also branching out into the LGBTQ, because that is a part of my identity. And so because they should be working together and not separate. And so I definitely try to be mindful of sharing things, whether it's through LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or wherever. We need to be able to share and repost and share the tools, the things that are happening, and always supporting them, because you never know what event or what thing might change somebody's life or their outlook on something, especially for those that want to get involved in advocacy. I'm all about sharing events and tools and things that are out there. So to help people in their understanding as well as in their advocacy.
Can I ask you this one question before I move on? With that being said, some of that stuff I would definitely, as I said earlier, I would definitely love to get some of that stuff. But what I would like to know is that in just learning and getting that information, is it against the organization if I, wanted to help to blast that via my blog, to do blog posts on some of this knowledge and things of that nature.
Oh no, I think they would be in favor of it. It's just a matter of finding the right, uh, creating these things in a way that you could do it in a way that people will understand it.
Right.
Because it's one thing to send something out, but whether people understand it, like your audience or whoever, it's so we want to make sure that we do it, whatever it is, we produce it in a way that's gonna be understanding and informative to people. But in general, no, I think we welcome. In fact, that's part of why I have my thing is to be more of an amplifier, right? To
Right.
amplify the things that beyond just our community, but beyond our community, so that everybody's getting this information and not just certain people. So.
Mhm. Okay, and how do you measure the impact of your advocacy efforts in advancing the rights and well-being of people living with HIV and AIDS?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
How do you measure the impact of your advocacy efforts in
Mm.
advancing the rights and well-being of people living with HIV and AIDS?
Oh, well, I would just say from the feedback that I get, I now collect them. So anybody send me a note, I collect it, and I've seen quite a few of them. Add probably ones I've not even like go back and find because I get messages all the time. So I try to find them and keep them, and to me, that is one way um, that I miss. So anytime someone tells me that something I did or they appreciate the work that I'm doing, and I know it's some person that I've not seen before in my work or just in any way, that that resonates with me because I mean, it just does. It speaks back. It's like the community speaking back to me, and so that is one way that I measure it. People may not realize, but yeah, I collect them. I collect these messages because they give me hope, and it also lets me know that I will say also anytime I'm invited somewhere. I mean, I didn't record the things that I did as I went, but there was a period where I just stopped and recorded like every workshop, every conference, every community forum, whatever, and it adds up. And so I know um, I've been some places just here within the US. And to me, that and across several states, to me, that says a lot. um, it says a lot, and I'm continuing to be involved in spaces and expanding, and so that is one way that I'm or a couple of ways that I'm measuring the impact, but particularly when people definitely tell me what impact I've had or thank me for what I'm doing, that lets me know it's like we have another one. Yeah.
So, what role do community partnerships play in the success of your organization's initiatives?
Mm. Well, it's one of the things that I hope to do more of. I've been fortunate to be a part of few things, especially as I want to expand, not just within HIV, but outside to Black gay networks and such. So through like Native Son, the Counter Narrative Project, I've been able to be a part of some of their programming and initiatives. And so I'm grateful for that because that is the community that I am from within the larger Black community, and so I want to make sure that our guys, our Black gay men, are aware and getting it, and that's what I hope to do more of because um, I don't that is something that I wrestle with as well because I feel like I had not done a good enough job of my outreach because I've been a part of an organization and you do what's best for the organization within the leadership, that sort of the leadership that you create with other people. And so in some way, I might have felt like I had abandoned the community, even though I am a representative of the community. So it is something that I'm hoping to do more of. So through my blog, Subtle Points, which has I have not launched it just yet, I'm hoping to be able to share more details in a way that helps them hopefully connect with things that I'm sharing about my experience. And so from the incarceration, from my being newly diagnosed, and just the advocacy, so on and so forth, the relationships, um, I'm hoping that I will be able to connect with them a lot more. And I have quite a bit of a following now, just through social media, just random. But it's not. I have not any type of um, formalized way of connecting with the community. So I'm hoping through the blog that I will get more followers to follow me and follow my insights and the perspectives that I share, and hopefully hear back from them and them give me feedback on things that matter to them. So, yeah.
Okay. And last question. As a public figure in HIV and AIDS advocacy, how do you balance personal and professional responsibilities?
Cool. That's a good question. That's a good question because that is something that I've had to walk with um, on a daily. Everything that it seemed like everything that I did was uh, professionally was also part of my personal, and so it was really hard to separate it. But I'm at the point now where I'm ready to like separate them, uh, just so I can feel the difference, because I've been walking with it together for a long time, and so when it came time for me to realize like who am I, it was really hard for me to sort of figure that out. But I think I have an understanding now because I was a different person before my diagnosis. I was a different person before the criminalization, and now I'm a whole different person through this experience. So trying to put all that together and figure out who I am today is something that I'm currently walking out. And so um, I try to recognize that I deserve to take a break. I deserve to not be bothered sometimes. Many of us know that we can't opt out of things like some people can. And so I try to be intentional about that. And I'm still learning how to do that even now. So um, learning to say no or give myself a break or just yeah, just exist and have fun and know that it's okay if I don't get to something right away. I'm human and I deserve to feel like a human being. So, yeah. So thank you for that question because that was, and sort of that being your last question, but it is something that I sort of have wrestled with for quite some time.
Well, all of us as business professionals sometimes, we have that struggle when it comes to that because, especially when you're passionate about
Mm-hmm.
the things that you do and your outreach, if it's to the public or if it's just to an audience or just a segment,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get to that point where you realize that you can't just have everything rolled up together.
Yeah.
But it's the separation is basically like, if you've got a child, it's like
Mm-hmm.
separation anxiety when you send them off to school for the very first time. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, this is new and I'm not ready for this. You know, that happens because you feel like when you start separating the two, that you're going to be missing a part of something. But you're
Mm-hmm.
not missing anything.
Yeah. Right.
Not missing anything.
That is true. I think what has helped me also as I reflect on for my memoir, like I'm taking all these notes and like collecting things and going back, it's helping me realize where I am in my journey.
Mhm.
And honestly, I'm kind of at the end of this journey in a way that the results, they're, from getting an award, not that I do for awards, but like looking back and like, wow, people honored me here, or they honored me there, or this happened or that happened. I'm in a whole different place right now. And it's eye-opening to me. And it feels good because now I can see where I am. Because at first I was just going and doing and going and doing and not really seeing an end, but just know that I was in it, committed, And so now that I've done some things and reached some milestones personally and professionally, um, I'm like, wow, yeah, okay. So now that I see where I am, and it has made the difference. So I think I know now how I need to take breaks and what works for me, what doesn't, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. And do you have any closing remarks that you like to leave our tidbits you like to leave our audience with?
Oh, I just want to encourage people to continue to try to understand this issue of HIV criminalization. It's not going away anytime soon. And so there's plenty of time to really dig in and learn about it. And don't beat yourself up if you are not catching on right away. It's such a nuanced issue that it takes time. It took me time to really get into it, as even as I lived it out and learn the advocacy around it. So again, just continue to support people living with HIV. You never know if it's your family member or a loved one or a friend, and let them know that there is lots of support out there for them if they ever find themselves feeling isolated around this issue, especially if they're being impacted by the HIV criminalization laws in various states. So yeah, that's what I want to tell people.
Well, I want to thank you for being here and sharing your time with us. Also, I want to make sure don't be a stranger because we need to have you back on the show at some point or another.
Oh, I'd be glad to. Yeah, there's always some things changing and happening.
Uh,
So,
and I really do appreciate it, and I'm sure that the audience appreciated it as well. And this was more than informative. This right here was like an educational experience, and I
mhm.
want to thank
So,
you, and I want to thank those out there in the audience that was watching. For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, please hit the subscriptions button and the notifications buttons to make sure that if there's a time where you can't catch a show, you'll be able to go back and catch it whenever you can. Again, I want to thank you, Mr. Suttle, for being here. And I want to thank everybody else for watching. And you all have a great evening. And we will see you tomorrow night at 6